Hello and welcome to this podcast. I'm so happy to announce that I finally posted on YouTube. It's so weird because if somebody views my video, it is being shown as a number. Meanwhile, on Spotify, you don't get exposed that easily. The only number is my reviews, which are not a lot. Not a lot at all. But I'm not gonna come here and be like, please give me a review. No, I'm terrified. But if you feel like it, you can email me if you have any spontaneous ideas. Today we're gonna talk about a nervous system response, which is called flight response. This is one of the four responses. One of the four is fight mode, flight mode, freeze mode, fawn mode. Now, the first three I figure you might have understood by their name what they are. But the fourth one is something like people pleasing, like getting your sense of peace by pleasing others. I figured I would like to talk about the flight response because I am on flight mode without knowing it. Sometimes flight mode isn't only I wanna leave now, it's not always as clear. Sometimes it's just, oh, I want to leave, but. And here's how things can get confusing inside our brains. The nervous system responses are actually here to protect us, but protecting doesn't always have to do with logic. It's more about feelings. Anger is also a feeling, but a protector also. Joy isn't always a protector. That's why we can have both a feeling and a protector. And it's a response because we get to feel stuff in our body and not only on our minds or our heart. But we feel it's so clear that it's a compulse, and the logic mind comes to wonder, comes to maybe help. When we feel something, when our brain is trying to protect us, it will be so obvious, because when we're angry, sometimes we feel a force in our hands. Maybe we're angry because we're trying to protect ourselves and our ancestors used to fight. I'm no scientist, this is just something that I have gathered during my many years of research on how to not feel like such a beast, not in fight mode, but in the sense of always wanting to hide. This is a flight response, and that's exactly why I wanted to talk about it, and in the sense of freezing. I tend to be very eloquent when it comes to explaining myself. Sometimes I get the lack of being in the right moment, being able to articulate myself. But when I'm in a shock, when I feel like I have disappointed someone, I cannot do that. It takes immense effort. And this is a separate episode because right now we're talking about flight mode. But those are responses and they can coexist. And if you have a response in one situation, it doesn't mean that you're gonna have the same response in another one. We tend to have pretty much four of them. Probably one is gonna be dominant in certain examples, but we are complex creatures. So there's not only one. And I used to feel like, no, I'm always on the freeze mode. On freeze mode. I don't want to go away. I'm not in a flight mode. This is misleading. That's why I wanted to talk about it. Because sometimes things are not as clear as we would like them to be. It can deprive us of clarity. I noticed myself that I have a lot of people who are my favorite, like more than two, regarding my friends. It's not easy for someone to become my favorite person, but once they do, it's certain. And once they do, unrealistic expectations build up. This is not something that makes me a well and functional being, because sometimes I use a lot that word. Like, I have noticed with my podcast that I use that word all the time, trying not to sound absolute. And guess what? I am. And I'm trying hard not to. I have noticed that when it comes to me being so happy, it will be as two parts of the same coin. The one part is gonna be full on joy, and the other one is gonna be, oh my god, I'm losing earth from my feet. I feel like the whole world is collapsing. One of my unrealistic expectations hasn't been met, and I want to go away. I tend to take the reactions of my favorite people as the end of the world. This has such a symbolic meaning. One unpleasant reaction, one reaction that says, I'm not very impressed by you, is straight up in my mind symbolizing a complete catastrophe. It is so hard not to base our identity in other people. It's also so hard to distinguish if this is indeed the truth and if this indeed says something about our reality, about our identity when we are in a crisis. We tend to think clearly when we are at peace or when we are happy, not when we are in fear and not when our logic mind has stepped back. It's mostly about survival instincts. Survival instincts can mess with the brain. And this is not philosophy, this is biochemistry. I'm no special in that, but I feel like this is common knowledge nowadays. Thank the scientists for that. I was gonna say thank God, but I believe that we should thank humans for that. Identity is based on how we perceive the world, how we perceive ourselves, but also how we think the world perceives us. And we tend to put ourselves in a box in the thought of, oh, this person feels like that about me, probably. So this is it. This is my reality. Constantly we're trying to prove what we think other people think of us and what we think can be successful. If I think that I'm gonna give the impression that I'm the most beautiful girl in the world, no, it is not possible. But if I think that I can be perceived as someone who is kind, that's possible. I will try to act like that. Sometimes I'm not kind. Most of the times I try to be. Sometimes when I'm in fear or angry, I am distant. And this is the reality of being in flight mode or in freeze mode. You don't want to be there. If you're in a fight mode, you want to be there. If you're in a fawn mode, you have to actively be there to ensure that you will be alright. And going away, if you physically cannot go away, it's gonna be like, I'm here, like someone's dad. I'm here, but you're not sensing me here. By hiding, by not being available, by being distant, this is where fantasies come. When we are anxious, we want to take a trip. Maybe a short trip, maybe a long trip. We begin to have dreams, both metaphorically and as in dreams, like in the bed. This is something so beneficial sometimes because humans need to travel. I'm a huge fan of that. But traveling should be done with a clear mind, not in a crisis. As in everything, everything should be done in a clear mind because mistakes get made and mistakes at our expense. But this is so utopic. This is not realistic. This has a reason. Wanting to travel, especially when we're not okay, has a reason. We are the grandchildren of our ancestors who were nomads. Nomads used to exist before thousands of years. Before the first towns, people were nomads. If something wasn't going alright, they would go elsewhere. Something that I have read by a book that is amazing, truly. I haven't researched if it's translated in English, so I cannot tell you, but it had to do with the coexistence of humans and other animals and other organisms. It used to say that we are prone to traveling because it's our instinct and it's a tactic that survived and it was a tactic that served a purpose. Fun fact, this is how the beginning of the idea of changing bodies, the beginning of the idea of reincarnation, this blew my mind actually. When nomads, as in families, used to travel, the mother could only carry one child. Child meaning a breastfed child, around 0 to 3-4 years old. If a child, a 4-year-old, had a 2-year-old sibling, the 2-year-old would be killed by the responsibility of their mother, so vendettas wouldn't be a thing. The mother would feel so guilty, and killing always had an impact, even in beings who weren't as philosophical as we are. But mothers and generally the community used to feel guilty and sad. So, boom, the idea of reincarnation. That's wonderful. And this is something that I want to talk about. We will talk about it on another podcast episode. How we create God and how God creates us. God, not as in Christianity, just as in an entity. If someone is an expert in that, please contact me. I would love to host you in my podcast, even though I am such a niche micro not influencer. I just recorded something and I realized that I had my AirPods on, and I have to say that again. Anyway, what happens with those dreams of wanting to escape? Sometimes it can be as simple as I'm in a lecture and I want to go for a coffee and I'm thinking about it. I'm actively playing that in my brain. The difficulty paying attention after a certain time. Sometimes it's going to work and thinking, oh, I'm gonna go to the gym or I'm gonna go home, take a nice shower, whatever. Sometimes it's more than just that. Sometimes it's getting yelled at and feeling like, oh, I want to destroy my whole life and go away. I want to move. I want to leave the country. Maybe it's something as large as that. Maybe it depends on the severity of the situation. It is valid. It is human. We don't live in a simple society, so we won't be having simple reactions. And the complexity is there, and the complexity is something that creates art. That's why it's so important. But also, art should comfort the disturbed and disturb the comfortable. So keep that in mind. I'm trying to keep that in my mind also. Sometimes I get to be the one being uncomfortable and disturbed, and sometimes I'm the disturbed being comforted by art. When I used to study for the exam season, hopefully and luckily, I studied something that I like, so it wasn't as harsh as it was at school, having to deal with all the things that I don't find interesting. And I used to study or write something, and images would flash right in front of my eyes. It wasn't something that I was provoking actively, it was just something that I had the need to see, and that was nature. Happy memories, memories I didn't know, I remembered, memories I confused with dreams, and vice versa. It was something like a savior in the moment. My mind would be swept away for a couple of minutes, maybe seconds, and those were not euphoric but almost euphoric. This has to do with daydreaming. Daydreaming is an active example of flight mode. I'm not here. In my presence, I'm here, but I don't like it here. So I cannot actively travel. I'm saying a lot of times the word actively, so I'll have to daydream. The unconscious mind, that's a given, doesn't know the difference between a lie and the truth. So if you imagine it, this exists. And this can be applied in so many examples. Take it in a good way. If you imagine your success, if you imagine your happiness, if you imagine your peace, it's already here. It's possible. Everything good is possible. And I'm not privileged to say that. I just am hopeful. And I'm not a very going out to nature type of person. A simple walk does it for me. Especially when I'm studying, or especially if I'm dealing with something that I have to be at home a lot. And this is where I find awkwardness. I didn't grow up in a house that I was allowed to just go away. I wasn't so allowed to enjoy my time in nature. And this is not something necessarily bad. Times are dangerous for small children. But I'm a grown up right now and I don't feel comfortable saying, yeah, I want to go on a walk. To do what? So I'm working on it. But it has awkwardness. And my awkwardness stops me from actually doing something good for myself, as in taking a walk. A lot of times this creates a negative result of building up anxiety, and not being able to release that, not being able to process that. So, boom, a huge wanting to leave. The only way out is through. This is why we don't want to engage in the flight mode. Because even if we do, it will give us a satisfaction that will not last as long as we would want it to. And that's why the mind follows us everywhere. That's why the only way out is through. Because even if we escape in the moment, it will be in the moment. The problem will be there. Maybe it would be seen less heavy if we re-examine that afterwards. Maybe it will seem a lot more heavy. It's not many times that we get to predict which one is which. The only way out is through, and the rabbit holds the clock says, all roads lead to Rome. Have you seen that? I'm talking about a meme. Yeah, I'm talking about a meme. Oh my god. I love modern technology so much. I'm such a huge fan. I will make a separate episode about this. The human mind actually knows what is good for us. My human mind knew that I wanted to see nature when I was studying, so I can refresh myself. My conscious mind didn't know. I knew. And technology is so complex, and it's maybe mimicking the human body or the nature in general. Mimesis is actually so beneficial, because while mimicking we add something. If we mimic something complex, it is more likely that we will turn it into something more complex, and at the same time as simple. To be able to understand something so complex, it's to analyze it in simple words. So this is when it comes to the art of complexity, the art of noticing that becomes the art of complexity. If we are in a good state of mind, this will seem wonderful. If we're not, this will seem cynical. Lucky for me, right now, I'm on the first one. There lies a huge paradox. Sometimes we want to leave because we are not feeling seen, but if we leave, the only thing that will happen is that we will not see ourselves. This is a true tragedy. It's difficult to deal with our inner world because we need to be the strong ones. It's scary to take breaks from being the strong one. This is hyper-independence maybe, but this is also deeply human. Something that isn't talked a lot, it's something that I understood by myself, is that when I'm acting on an impulse, when I'm acting on wanting to go away, either emotionally or physically, I will have such guilt afterwards. Even if I don't do it, even if I just think about it a lot, I will have guilt. And if it involves another person, I will be like, oh, I'm so sorry. And usually the guilt comes right after acting up, or when I'm so close to acting up. I will try to make it up to them. Even if I haven't done a thing, I will try to make it up to them. And the vast majority of times that I have acted up, I have later talked about it with my friends, and they were like, it wasn't as big of a deal as it was in your head. Your reaction wasn't as big as you think it is. We are our harsher judge, and we project that on others. When I have an impulse and when the guilt actually starts to resurface, I try not to react on it. I try not to be overly loving afterwards, because it's not a reaction coming from my reality. It's a reaction coming from my inner world. A simple example is, if a friend of mine gives me a present or a flower, I want to have a reaction, a positive one. This is a reaction from reality. If I think in my head that I don't want to do that, but I thought of that and I'm guilty, this resembles OCD, I have to make it up to them. No, this is not the reality. This is not the reality for them. Maybe they will appreciate me being overly loving, but it's not pure. And flowers that come from apologies don't last very long, usually, they say. I never received one. I received flowers, but not out of apologies. I'm so lucky. This goes on my gratitude list. Yeah. Another thing that makes me feel so guilty if I react on my flight mode is death. This is so dry. It's death, because it's the only living that is certain. Till it being debunked, we cannot return from the dead. If we do I don't know who we're gonna meet. I feel like, oh, if I react on my compulse or if I indeed listen myself wanting some space depending on the situation, I will be holding from the time that I could spend with something, even if it's a project or if it's someone as a human being. It leaves me guilty and death really waits on me. Maybe it's me having certain experiences, maybe it's me being overly sensitive, maybe it's me being a human. I'm trying so much not to be a harsh judge about my humanity because it will not last long. I'm not saying this because it's the truth. I'm not saying this because it matches the correct way of behaving. I'm just saying it because I feel guilty and I have come to the conclusion that it's best to take a bit of time for myself and be better than to be there and not be completely there. It's okay also to feel guilty about it a bit because this is painful, realizing that you don't have much time or that you have time but not as much as you want. Time is a feeling. If you feel like you have a lot, then you have a lot. If you feel like you have none, then you have a lot, but you don't care because you feel like you don't. This is not a podcast that you will hear solutions. This is not a podcast that you will hear conclusions. The only conclusion I'm gonna come up with is the only way out is through, but with the right tools, in the right environment, and at your own pace. We're dealing with so much information. We should be glad about it, but limits are there for a reason, and I cannot tell you what to do. I'm just gonna say that whatever you do, be kind with yourself and one step at a time. And dealing with the nervous system can make us nervous. Lol. It's a procedure that takes a lot of time, and even acknowledging something is a huge step. And if you're dealing with something, you're not alone. There is tons of research and a lot of people and communities and somatic workouts, etc. We have time. Let's have a little bit of hope in our time. Lastly, before jumping to the painting, if you feel that response, it's not necessarily because you went through something extremely traumatic. Our nervous system doesn't need something extremely traumatic to happen to be a little bit on the edge. I would like to show you a painting from Caspar David Friedrich. It's this one. It's called Stages of Life. I will put that in a photo. For the Spotify listeners, it's 5 people and 5 ships. You can Google it. I will leave the name on it. One ship is so far ahead, it's not a competition. One is approaching it, 2 are on shallow water, and one is a little bit farther. And the one so far away is the oldest person in the painting. The 2 ones that are closer to the start, it's symbolic for their start of life. There are 2 young children in there. This correlates to flight mode in a weird way because one way or another we're gonna leave. We should enjoy the journey. With us, there are a lot other more people who are traveling on this wonderful journey that sometimes doesn't feel wonderful. Sometimes we meet shallow water, sometimes the water is clear, sometimes it's windy and cold, and some other times you see the sunsets. Even if a reality seems like that, it's not absolute, it's not gonna last forever, and the bad days are not gonna last forever. So yeah, I will leave you to that. I'm not gonna go and analyze it so much because the editing, let me tell you, the editing of my slow voice, oh my god, it's so tiring. I get migraines editing and I'm not even good at it. So yeah, I've actually understood how to make Spotify clips and I'm all here for it. You can, let me tell you that because I don't tell you that. I have a TikTok account, it's my name, Artives, and I have an Instagram account, it's my name, Artives. And if you want to search me in any platform, it's Artives. I have a Substack also, but I don't post. But if you want, we can become friends. Anyway, bye bye. Thank you for listening.